Welcome to Adorama Voice, a voice for creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about using art as a form of discovery and exploration. I also have a great message from Jose and a review from Grammy999. So for the last couple of podcasts, we've talked a little bit about kind of creating for a living and maybe a little bit more of the technical stuff as a photographer, but let's get back into kind of art in general. And I want to talk a little bit about creating as a way of discovery, not just of discovery of stuff that you might encounter, but discovery of ourselves. So I'm going to start with the first thing though, because I think that's one of the things that is important and something that I think we discover as we become adults. You know, I talk to a lot of people who get into doing photography later in life or get into the arts. And a lot of times with them, they've built a career, they've built a family, they do these things, and then they're looking for something else, right? Because when we're younger, when we're children especially, we are kind of allowed, if you will, and we allow ourselves to explore. You know, we leave, I remember, being a child and leaving my house in the morning and just wandering around the neighborhood, seeing who was out to do things, finding a path in the woods I hadn't seen before, looking at things, looking under rocks and observing the birds and the sky and these kind of things that you do when you're a child. And oftentimes as you get older, they kind of fall to the wayside because we're focusing on kind of being an adult, right? Having a career, paying for that new car or trying to go on the vacation so that you can have some time to enjoy. But the reality is that we can enjoy and focus and see things all the time if we just allow ourselves to. I think, I know that there's a great lyric in a song by John Lennon that he says, life, I'm probably going to misquote it here, but life is what happens when you're busy making plans, right? Busy making other plans, I think is how it says. And this is one of those things that is such a truth to so many people, right? There's so many things going around and we're thinking, okay, well, we have this vacation, on the holidays, but I'm just going to grind down now and do the work I have to do so I can make the money. And that's that thing you see people memes, oh, it's Monday. But the reality is we should try, I believe, I hope for everybody that we can try to enjoy life always. And I think art is one way to do that, allowing ourselves to express ourselves. And the reason why I say art is because of this. If you went to a park as an adult and you just sat on a bench and watched the pond or watched the birds, some people might find that unusual. In fact, you might even have this nagging feeling inside of you like, oh, why am I just sitting here doing this? I should be doing other things. I have this to do. I could be doing that. So because you're not actively doing something, a lot of times as an adult, we feel like we're wasting our time. But if you go out with a camera in your hand, or you go out with a notebook and some drawing pencils, some charcoal, or you go out with some paints, and you set up and you spend 2 hours painting that pond or making photos of the flowers, then all of a sudden we're doing something, but we're still allowing ourselves to enjoy the things that are around us, to kind of step away from what is the norm of our life. And this is true whether you're a commercial photographer or not. This is even true if you're a commercial photographer. A lot of times, and I've talked about this before, many photographers, as they progress through their career, they start to become what I call hired guns. I don't pick up my camera unless you pay me. And I think that's not the best thing in the world. I feel like if you're not doing it because you love it, if you're not passionate, if you don't want to do things, if you don't have side projects, if you don't have things you're working on that aren't your money maker, I think that eventually you can become stale. I think that being out there exploring, being out there interacting with different things is going to help us grow as artists when we give ourselves that time, that excuse. I remember that when I was younger, the camera was a great way for me to actually meet people. I would go to, join like a camera club or in school, and I met people that I didn't know, right? Or I would go around with my camera and making photos places, and people would be like, oh, you're taking a picture of that. Especially, I used to use Polaroids, so people would want to see them right away. And it was just a way for me to interact with people that was different than what I normally would do. It wasn't my standard, normal, everyday friend group. It was people I was meeting through doing these different things, whether it be going on, a hike that I wouldn't normally have gone on, except I had to go up there to get that perfect picture. And it just drove me to do it. It gave me a reason, because I think that a lot of times we need that reason. Maybe in an ideal world, you don't. And you're just like, you know what, I'm going to take the afternoon off and walk around. But most people, I think, have trouble doing that, especially in modern world. If you're a little bit older and you're kind of in a career, it's hard for you to just take an afternoon to just do something. So by adding that creative spin to it, it allows us to do it. Take an art class, go to a museum to study the pictures, because you can look at it in the back of your head as like, well, I'm using it to improve my craft. When I was younger, I worked for a shoe company, Reebok, developing shoes, and they would give the people in design, I was in development, not design, they would give the people in design, like the people who drew the pictures of the sneakers and stuff, I think it was twice a month, they would go on trips. Like they literally would go to like the museum together and like look at fine art and look at modern art, look at all these different things to help to be inspired to create, because that brings you outside your shell, right? When you're just doing the one thing all the time. If I'm a studio photographer and I'm photographing jewelry all the time, I'm not out there exploring, and it might become stale. So it can help me grow as an artist by just seeing other things, by discovering other things, by doing street photography, which is one thing that I actually like to do, and it's so outside my norm of what I do. You hardly would ever see me post a street photography picture anywhere, but it's something that I do for pleasure. I go around and with my small camera, and I see interesting things in the street, and I take pictures of it. I like it. It gives me a different thing to think about. It's I often use a film camera for it. I use a very manual film camera, and it really kind of tests my skills, if you will. So it's still getting exposure and stuff. I can't look at it right away, as they say. I'm usually guessing exposure because I'm using a camera that doesn't have a meter in it. This allows me to, again, stretch my legs as a photographer. And sometimes I see things that then inspire me to do something more creative. I've talked about this before, where you don't always have to focus on making the great photo all the time. Sometimes you're just out there exploring and discovering and seeing things, which will then allow you to do that later on. Because I believe that all of us, when we pick up a pencil or a brush or a camera to make a photo, an intentional photo, not just a snapshot of, your grocery list, we have something to say. We might not even know what it is we're trying to say. There's something about that thing that we're seeing that we want to capture, and we want to capture it for a reason. And allowing ourselves to do that is a way to kind of explore ourselves. Like, why did I photograph this? Why did I go to this area to shoot? What draws me to photograph sunsets or photograph people or street photography or insects or animals, right? What is it that draws me out, that makes me want to do that? That you may discover that you have an interest in something that you really didn't even realize. It was just kind of at the back of your mind. And the art is going to allow you to kind of explore it in a different way. So let's take a minute and just think a little bit about how we can involve the discovery process in our creation. So again, I'm probably going to go mostly from the angle of a photographer because that's my background. But you could imagine if you were a musician, if you were a videographer, if you were a painter, being able to do similar things. What we want to do is take some kind of tool of our trade, and it might be, let's say you're a musician, it might be a tape recorder, or you might not tape recorder. I'm showing my age. It might be your phone with that you can record something on. It might be your instrument, or if you're a painter, it might just be your phone to take pictures to get some ideas. If you're a photographer, it might be a camera, or it might not be. And let's step out there into the world and see what's there. Let's see what we can see, and let's call it, so that we can kind of justify it to ourselves, let's call it work. Let's say that we're seeking inspiration. Let's say that we're out there discovering, and this discovery is going to help us become better at our craft. Because even if we're doing this as a hobbyist, right, we still, I would imagine, want to get good or better or what have you. We want to be the best, whatever we are, that we can be, even if we never think about doing it for money. So if I am a photographer and I love photographing, portraits of my family, I might take a class in portrait photography. I might take a class in drawing and painting, because this will help me expand my ideas of what light and what shadow and what matters, right? Because when you're painting something, if I'm going to photograph somebody, I have to consider everything that's there, right? I have to consider the light, whether I'm going to add it or subtract it. I have to consider what's behind them. Am I going to move them? What's there? But if I'm going to draw somebody, I can draw whatever I want behind them, right? They could be standing in the middle of the street. I could draw them in a forest glade. I can do what I want. But if I look at the light from the city, and I'm drawing them based on what I see, and then I draw this forest glade behind them, it's not going to make sense, right? And this will help me understand that, like, where somebody stands matters. What's in their environment matters. And it will help us create something that has more depth because we'll understand, we'll have more kind of interaction with different environments, things that we're not used to dealing with. So just being out there doing it, right? Doing something different. I know that in New York City, they have lots of these classes where people put them together at studios, and they're usually called like drink and draw if you're an adult, where they'll be like a bar or whatever, and, people can hang out and have a social hour. And then they'll also have a model come in and people can draw. And you get all levels of people at these. You've got basically people that have, barely drawn at all and they're going for the social aspect. You've got people that are really, serious meaning that they do it a lot. Artists who, this is an opportunity for them to kind of interact with different models and stuff. So this is a great opportunity for anybody who is interested in that at all to do it. And the same thing is true for photo clubs. I've talked about those before. You do these open shoots, and you don't go into these things thinking, or you shouldn't probably go into these things thinking you're going to get your portfolio shot by going to open shoot stuff. You go there because you want to meet people. You want to interact. You want to discover who else is out there. You want to discover things about yourself. Maybe if you're used to shooting only your family, the portraits of your family, you want to just try to photograph somebody else. And by going to an open shoot with as a model, there's a little bit of a safety net there, as opposed to hiring somebody, which is nice, except now you've got somebody in front of you and you don't really know what to do, right? So this can be good to see how other people do things, because we can only kind of watch and observe so much. We need to actually get our hands dirty, if you will. So this is where the discovery process comes up. We want to go in and just start doing different things. The challenge would be to try something a little different than what you're used to doing. Kind of touch on either a different medium. Maybe you go out and use a camera and take photos if you're a painter. Maybe you take a painting class if you're a photographer, right? Maybe you just go on a trip, like a weekend hike up the Appalachian Trail, which would be near me, where you just hike and camp and do something different, right? Just explore something different. What is it like when you don't have all the technology around you? What is it like when you don't have the pressure that you have to do your work or whatever, and you can actually be free to discover, to sit next to the stream in the woods and just watch the light reflect off of the water and listen to the sounds around you? What can we get from that when we just allow ourselves to discover and be out there and kind of interact with the world, whether it be the natural world, as I just mentioned, or street photography, right? What if we go to, especially if you don't live in a city, if you live like in the suburbs, maybe you take a weekend trip to a nearby city and you just look around, right? You look at the areas that are older and kind of were developed a long time ago with architecture you're not familiar with. Maybe you go to the newer areas where things are being built and you see the action, the construction sites, the workers. Maybe you look at the people that are kind of, involved in the various things that are going on in the city, usually like street performers or farmers markets that happen in the parks. You look at all these different things. And if you're somebody who is always in the city, maybe you take that, you jump on a train and you take a trip out to the mountains and you go on a hike and you do something completely different, and you kind of allow yourself to discover and use the art, the camera, the painting, the drawing, the capturing of sound as your reason, as your method. And I think when we allow ourselves to do things that are outside the norm of what is expected of us, we'll start seeing things about ourselves. We'll discover that we like something that we didn't know about, right? Or that we don't like something that we thought we would. We'll learn kind of what it is that we're trying to say through our art, because we'll start to bring back the bits and pieces that we see into the art that we're creating. So just allowing yourself to kind of be washed over with different things will allow you to pick and choose those things that then work with what you already have to grow and become more versatile as an artist. I think it's important that we take a step back from our busy lives where we work hard. I'm doing air quotes and stuff here, you can't see me, and take a moment to kind of think about what's going on around us. Enjoy what's there while it's there. Seek out things that we're not used to seeing. Discover things that we didn't know existed. You would be amazed what's going on all around you that you just don't know is there because you're not giving yourself a reason to explore it. And art can be that reason, right? It's easy to say, hey, I'm going to go out there and shoot some landscape photography, and you feel like you're doing something. But really, what you're doing is you're exploring, you're discovering, you're seeing what's around you, you're recharging yourself so that you can do those things that we do every day that we love. If I'm walking around doing street photography, like I said, That doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing portraits because I love doing portraits. But what it does mean is that it gives me something else to do, takes my mind off of that, but still allows me to exercise those same skills. So I would love to hear from you guys. Let me know if you do these things. Do you go on little retreats? Do you try different mediums? Do you go out and discover with your camera or video camera or audio mixer or paints? Do you just go and explore? Do you try to get these things around you, or do you not do that? And do you realize, wow, I don't really do that? Let me know. I would love to know. You can use the Anchor app. There's in the show notes, you'll see a link. You can send me a message up to a minute long. You could also send me an email to adoramavoice@gmail.com, and let's talk about this. So I got a great email from Jose this week. He talks a little bit about how he does mostly landscape photography and has kind of fallen into, as we often do, right? Doing kind of a commercial project with jewelry, and it kind of involves portraits. Okay, question. How would you define a portrait that's meant to showcase jewelry and accessories? Is it fashion photography, commercial photography, product photography? I've been digging online, couldn't really find a definitive answer. I'm trying to organize my work so any possible customers can find a comprehensive order and rhythm. Okay, so this is actually a really great question, and I'm only going to touch on it a tiny bit right now. That is because I feel like this might be the full topic of next week. So we'll see. I might do it in combination with something else, but I'll definitely talk about this more next week. But what I want to say here is that we need to, when you're labeling your photos or you're putting them in categories, this is one of those areas that can be really, really tricky. And looking for as we often do as people, right, a rhythm or a definite answer here is really tricky. What I would generally do, and again, I'll talk a lot more about this next week, but what I would generally do is think about who your client is and what they would be looking for. That is, if somebody is going to hire you to do this project, what do you think they would be searching for? And that's really what you should call it. Not what some photographer online, whether it be me or somebody else, believes that you should call it, right? It comes down to what your clients would think of when they're looking for it. And this, if you want to really get into it for SEO and stuff, you've got to do, you got to look for keywords and stuff. I'm going to talk a lot about that next week, but thanks, Jose, for writing in. And if you guys have any questions or cool topics that I can use for future episodes, please send me a message using the Anchor app or an email. The information to do that will be at the end of the show. Okay, well, we have a great review this week from Grammy999 via Apple Podcasts in France. Philosophy and art, shared with sincerity and enthusiasm. 5 stars. Daniel Norton's podcasts are unique. He shares his experiences, knowledge, and philosophy with sincerity and pleasure and generosity of spirit. His enthusiasm for his art is infectious. Very highly recommended. Well, thank you, Grammy. Photography has been something, or create the arts has been something that I have been involved in my whole life. It feels like it's something I'm very passionate about, and I'm glad to have people that are also passionate listening and responding and calling in. And if you would like to review the podcast or rate it, that would be great. Small podcasts like this live and die on those things. Apple's algorithm and the other algorithms, Stitcher and those kind of things, they pick up podcasts based on ratings and reviews. So if you can take a time to rate and review the podcast, I would appreciate it. And every week I read one, so maybe next week it'll be yours. I'd like to thank Adorama for sponsoring the podcast. As always, you guys can support them by going to adorama.com and getting any of your photo, video, computer, audio, electronics, all that good stuff. Also check out adorama.com/create no matter what for all kinds of contests where you can win free gear, and also maybe it'll inspire you to create something that you hadn't thought of before. If you'd like to have your voice on the podcast, you could send me a message using the Anchor app. There will be a link in the description below. You can also send me an email with an attached voice recording to adoramavoice@gmail.com, or you can send me an email and just ask me to read it, and I will, you can type it out basically, and I'll read it for you. So in any case, I'd love to hear from you all, and I'll talk to you soon.